Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk D&D 3.5. Today I thought I would begin by talking about crunch versus fluff, or in other words, mechanics versus flavor. Basically what it comes down to is how something functions in the game with numbers, how it's going to affect a character, versus how do you imagine it affecting a character? What do you see in your mind as going on? That's kind of what we're looking at here. So, ideally, you get the best of both worlds. Now, in practice, there's a whole lot of things that are only going to have one side, good, if that even. So, sometimes people refer to certain things such as feats or skills as trap options. Even some classes, prestige classes, are trap options because they don't deliver on what they claim to. One classic example in 3.5 is to just put all of your complaints onto the monk because it's a core class, and it puts itself out there as a fighter type that can be in the front lines and put out a whole lot of attacks with its flurry of blows and do lots of damage with its unarmed strike. As it gets higher level, does more damage, but in reality it's pretty weak. Its myriad of supposed class options or class abilities, they don't really end up being nearly as good as it sounds. A lot of new players will read through the classes and they'll see the monk and they'll read through it, and if they tend to be leaning towards the martial side of things, they'll think the monk sounds really good, and then just as you level up, the monk will fall further and further behind even just a regular fighter. It doesn't look that way. So some would even argue that the fluff is rather weak on a monk. I think that argument tends to come from the fact that perhaps the monk doesn't fit into the standard Western fantasy world as well as the other classes do, and I totally get that. I don't have that issue. I like the fluff of the monk, but I definitely see the failure of the mechanical side of the monk. I've never bothered to rebalance the monk. I've done a lot of work on other classes and prestige classes to rebalance them for my campaigns, but for whatever reason I never really bothered to work on the monk. I don't really know why that is. I do like the monk from a fluff standpoint. However, I guess I feel that it is just not worth saving. It's too far gone. There are some interesting prestige classes for the monk, but it's still just weak overall. And I may not get into this today, I might talk about it at some point, but with the tiers, with the class tiers and power levels and all that optimization discussion, that could be its own whole thing. If the party is balanced properly, then the monk can shine very well. It really can. But I think that most people are going to pick different classes that would probably outshine it unless there's a gentleman's agreement to build characters around that level. But as I started saying, that's an entirely different discussion. I'm going to try to stick with the mechanics versus fluff here. So yeah, so the monk was an example of a trap option. That's why I started talking about the monk. But then you get something else, let's say, so that was a trap option because it had poor mechanics, good fluff. So how about something with good mechanics but bad fluff? How about a variant class as an example? The spell to power erudite has really, really good mechanics. I suppose it's a bit of an overpowered sense of things with the really good mechanics, but it's very good mechanics. However, as far as the fluff goes, it's basically just a scion. There's really no good explanation why that particular class was needed. It's not really that different from the scion. I know it's a variant, and the variants don't have to be too different, but it doesn't really feel like it's its own class if you read the descriptions. I don't know. I don't think that the spell to power erudite is all that different from an erudite. So, I don't know. It just seems like something that somebody thought would be really, really fun to play as because of how powerful it becomes, and just published it. Staying with the classes as examples, And back to core, I'll suppose, something that is good both mechanically and fluff. You could think of any of the, I think any of the core caster classes, really, because they have, any of the full caster classes is what I was thinking of. I was thinking cleric, sorcerer, druid, wizard. I think they all have unique fluff, and their mechanics are pretty much all about, except for the druid, all about their spellcasting. And, once you delve into the spellcasting, there's so much there, so that you can build all kinds of different casters, all kinds of different ways, and I think that is great mechanically. It gives a lot of replayability within the same class, but also that fluff lets you roleplay it very nicely. So, like I said, those casters are all good. You can have a lot of different scenarios with good fluff, bad mechanics, or any, variation therein. But one thing that you can do is, if you've got something with good mechanics and bad fluff, is you can just refluff it. So when you refluff something, odds are good you want to talk to your DM first about it before you do this, because it might not fit within whatever campaign world you're in, but you just, either alter it slightly, or change a good amount of it, or just rewrite it altogether. So let's say you enjoyed the ranger, you enjoyed the favorite enemy mechanics and all that, but instead of the wilderness lore, let's say you were in, a more dungeon or urban setting, and you wanted to be more of an assassin type. His favorite enemies were all going to be like different types of humanoids. Then you could just refluff that, and say that, he spent all of his time watching his enemies, preying on them. And then you could be more of an assassin type, evil, in the dark killer person, instead of ranger, who's more about the wilderness and hunting animals and monsters and things. So, in both cases, you're going to use the same mechanics, but you just refluffed it to fit within a different campaign, a different setting. And, you can refluff just about anything. You don't really need any rules to refluff something. That's the part that only influences your imagination, how you perceive the game, how the campaign works in a roleplay kind of point of view. So, everybody could refluff their characters, just as long as it's okay within that campaign world. As long as it still works, it makes sense, because you don't want to have, you don't want to refluff, let's say, a fighter who is an archer into some kind of space alien sniper when you're dealing with Western fantasy setting. That's not going to make any sense. It's not going to fit. It's going to be strange, and there's going to be some problems, I'm sure, when you're talking about how you want to hunt down space aliens, and you're currently in a hobgoblin lair or something. It would be strange. So, as long as you're on point with the group, refluffing can be a great thing. There's also some classes that actually have refluff options built within them. I don't think it's too common to have that, but one that comes to mind is the Green Star Adept. It's a prestige class, I believe, in Complete Arcane. It's not a great class, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty why. I've always liked the class from a fluff standpoint, and since I'm talking about the fluff here, I'm going to focus on that. So it's kind of like, I like one person described it as he's an addict. He's gotta get that green star medal, man. Gotta get it, I need it. But basically, you could change it. Instead of a green star adept, and you're not focusing on that star medal anymore, it could be anything. It could be a mantine adept, or an obsidian adept, ruby adept. It doesn't really matter. You can change that to whatever. That's just the fluff of it. It doesn't really matter what the star medal is, just that you're obtaining it and using it to further your powers. So I really like that they included that change, or the refluff, into the description of that class, because I know that the whole star medal turns off some people. I think that, I almost started going into the mechanics there. I'm not going to. I really, really like the Green Star Adept, but man, the crunch just bothers me. So I'm going to carry on there. So if you were to instead take something with really good fluff, but crummy mechanics, and you wanted to rework the mechanics, then you're talking homebrew, and at that point, you're going to need to go through the DM for everything, and if you're the DM, then, feel free to make the changes you want to change, and just make sure that you tell your players. Or, good or bad fluff, whatever. Let's just say that, a class I haven't picked on yet. Let's say Barbarian. Alright. Let's say you like the concept of the rage, but you don't like the way it works. Maybe you don't like the stat changes or the fact that you're exhausted afterwards. You can only do in battle. Maybe that you can't cast spells when you're raging. Whatever it is, you want to change that. And let's say you make up some other method for raging. Maybe it'll affect the skills more or something. You're not just going to make that change on your own. You're going to ask the DM if you can do that. You work with the DM. You make it fit within the campaign rule. You make sure that it doesn't imbalance everything. Because really, that's what it comes down to when you're talking about changing the mechanics. It really just comes down to how is this going to affect everything. And I mean everything. Because if you take these changes to one class, okay, so it's going to change that class. But let's say they're NPCs. Well, okay, it's not just affecting you in that class, it's going to affect those NPCs. But it's not just affecting those NPCs. Let's say that it's got a class ability that is shared between other classes, and you're changing that class ability. Like evasion, for example. There's a few classes that get evasion. If you change that, then boom, all those classes change. So now it's not just you and your class, it's all the classes with that class ability. And then if you start doing a lot of changes, like let's go to the extreme here and start saying you're changing how like low light vision and dark vision work, even, let's say blind sight. Because of whatever reason, there's lots of different prestige classes and races and things that do that. Well, now you're affecting not just the class, like let's say a prestige class that, gave you those visions, but now you're talking about affecting races too, and that affects a huge part of the world. So, slight changes could have a large ramification within the campaign rule, and that's why you need to make sure that you're not only thinking about it really in detail, but also that you're going over it with the DM. And if you are the DM making these mechanical changes, then yeah, you've got to think about how that's going to affect everything. And you need to tell the players, as I said, because it's going to affect them too. They may or may not want to take this, I'll call it new option. Like, let's say you as the DM were changing how the paladin worked. Let's say you relaxed the code of conduct. You made them easier going so that they don't have to be so regimented. Well, maybe one of the players only wanted to take the paladin because they liked that code of conduct. They thought it was cool, and, they really wanted to get into that role-play concept, and then you go and change it on them. Well, suddenly it doesn't appeal to them anymore. They don't want to be a paladin anymore. You got to let your players know ahead of time. You can't spring changes on them like that mid-campaign. That's got to be a start of the campaign, here's what's going on type of thing. And I think as a great example, I'll just talk about my campaign, because I'm actually about to start a new campaign. As of this recording, next week is going to be session 1. Or, I don't know if we're going to have a session 0. We kind of just have been talking on Discord for a while, so I think we might be good on that front. But anyway, I suppose I could talk about session 0 at some point too. This part might be more for DM's side of things, but in my campaign, the first thing I thought about was what campaign I'm going to run, obviously, but then once I settled on that, I thought more about what sources I'm going to allow, and I'm pretty lenient when it comes to sources. I pretty much will consider anything, and that's kind of a lot, so I'll clarify that a little. Any 3.5, I don't do Pathfinder, but any 3.5 that is reasonable. So, in general, I don't do third party, but if it fits, then I'm okay with it. I don't consider Dungeon and Dragon third party, so I allow everything in Dungeon and Dragon, the magazines. And generally any Wizards of the Coast books I just allow. I tend to stay away from the 3rd edition ones. I prefer the 3.5 ones. And once all that is in my head, I pass it on to the players. I give them some character creation information about how I want to generate ability scores, feats, skills, whatever. I tweak a little things here and there in terms of balance. In my mind, what balance is, again, a lot of that comes down to where you are as a group. So I prefer mid to high optimization, but my group in the last campaign, I mean, we went from levels 1 to 13, was more or less low to mid optimization. So some of what my character creation attempts did was kind of just to bring them up a little bit. I don't fully expect them to be mid to high optimization, and I will just have to adjust for that. And that's fine, I don't mind. I can handle that. Like I said, I like mid to high optimization, but I think it's easier to step down than it is to step up. And that just comes from considering all the things. So there are so many things to think about and combinations to have that really getting to the high optimization point takes a lot of, book delving, I suppose. And being on the DM side of things, you just do that more because you have to see all the monsters. You got to think about what they're going to do, how they're going to fight, how they're going to interact with the world, what kind of magic you want going on behind the scenes, etc., etc. So there's a lot that the DM does that the players don't really have to do. All the players have to do is think about their character and what they want their character to do and interact with the group. So it's important for the DM to try to set things up for the group so that the group can be balanced together. I think the most important thing for everyone's enjoyment is for everyone to be able to engage effectively every session. And in order to do that, the characters need to be balanced together. So you don't want, let's say, a wizard who is just decked out with all of the most essential spells, with all the feats and options that make him get as many possible spells all the time, with all the metamagics and everything. And then you have a monk with, like, dodge and mobility and endurance as their chosen feats. There's huge disparity between those two, and the monk is not going to be able to engage effectively with that wizard around unless the DM throws out ridiculous encounters that are so pathetically easy for the wizard that he could, handle them all by himself, versus, something that would challenge that wizard would totally wipe that monk on the floor. However, if the party comes together and works on their characters together, lets everybody know what they're doing, what they're planning, then there's going to be more balance amongst each other, so everyone should be able to have a role in the party. And the role doesn't have to be unique, it doesn't have to be adhered to all the times, and it can change. However, it is generally a good idea for everyone to have some idea of what they're expected to do, what they are expecting to do, and what they expect others to do. So if you're going to have one person that's going to be up front as a tank, another one that's up front, getting as many hits in as possible, a caster or two, arcane divine, maybe, a rogue type skill monkey, something like that. It's better to have some different dynamics like that. It doesn't mean you have to be, okay, I'm going to be the divine caster cleric, I have to be the cleric. No, you could be anything, you can be druid, favored soul, whatever. It doesn't have to be just cleric, but same thing with arcane. It's like, you don't have to be a wizard. If you want to be the arcane caster, you can be a bard, a sorcerer, whatever. It's fine. Whatever works best for the group, and that's why you want to talk about it. What you don't want to have is a group of 4 to 6 players that are all doing the same thing. You don't want a group of 5 skill monkeys. What's going to happen when you got, something that's supposed to be overcome by magic? Well, I guess that's somewhat of a failure on the DM's part to have a challenge or obstacle that can't be overcome by the party, but, it's also part of the group's failure to not diversify. And this problem can go in any direction. If you've just got too many of one type of thing, you're going to have problems. Like, let's say you had 4 people that are trying to be up front and 2 casters. Unless you're fighting in open battlefields all the time, you're going to run into cramped quarters and people are going to be ineffective. You're not going to be able to get to the enemy. You're not going to be able to fight. You're going to be sitting there wondering what to do or trying to use a ranged weapon when you're not an archer, Like a crusader trying to use a bow, that's just not a thing. That's not going to work. So I'm definitely big on group dynamics, trying to get everybody to work together to come up with the best things possible. In my group, they work together pretty well. I had 2 groups, now I only have 1 group, so this is the first time that the 2 groups have come together as one. I've got 6 players, so they haven't played together yet. They don't all know each other's style, but I think that they'll all work together pretty well. I got a good group. I'm really happy with my group. Should be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to play the Shackled City, the first of the Dragon Magazine adventure paths to go from levels 1 to 20. I am excited about that completely. My group consists of, let's see if I can remember this offhand, a factotum, a scion, a druid, a sword sage, a beguiler, and an evangelist, which is one of the cleric variants from Dragon Magazine number 311. 311 is one of my favorite issues. It's got all kinds of great stuff in it. I love it. I'm just going to talk about the evangelist for a moment here, not to be confused with the prestige class evangelist, which is terrible. The dragon cleric variant evangelist is pretty cool. It casts like a sorcerer, so you have spells known just like a sorcerer, and instead of just having you pick what domain spell you get for the day for each level, instead all of the domain spells are added to your spells known as you level up, and you get more domains as you level up. I believe in the end you end up with 5 domains, which is pretty cool. So you end up with way more spells known, 5 more per level than the sorcerer would, and, but you don't really get to pick the individual spells, you just get to pick the domains. But I think there's so many domains that you can get good stuff that way, so I'm pretty interested to see how it works out, because I've always liked it, and, one of my players thought that it was interesting enough that she's going to try it out, so I'm glad. I think it'll be pretty cool. I don't know if it's going to bring the cleric down to tier 2, but I have a feeling that it will, actually. The evangelist does not get turn undead, and that's fine because the Shackled City is not an undead-focused campaign. It's not really an issue. However, the evangelist also does not get spontaneous cure spells, so I think it'll probably bring the cleric from tier 1 down to tier 2. Again, if you don't know the tier system, then don't worry about it. However, it was one thing I thought about. But, given the party, I think it's okay if I don't have any tier 1s, because everybody's going to be right around the, what classes did I say? Probably around tier 2 to 3, I think. I believe there are some arguments for Scion being tier 1 or tier 2. I consider it tier 2, but I'm not really familiar with psionics. This is going to be my first campaign with psionics. I was really excited about that too, actually. I tried to get my players to use psionics in a campaign that didn't really get anywhere, that I started, 6 months ago maybe. It didn't just pan out, but whatever. It didn't happen, so I really have no experience with psionics, but I am interested. I'm very, very interested, so that'll be a nice thing to happen. So I think I've got a decent balance. So I have 6 characters. The campaign is supposed to be for 6, so that's good. I got the Sword Sage and the Factotum trying to be frontliners. I know the Factotum is a skill monkey. It's known as a skill monkey, but he's kind of building it to be a frontliner. It's pretty interesting. He's taking a lot of stuff to boost his HP and damage, so I think it'll work out. So yeah, I got the 2 frontliners, then I got the Scion, the Evangelist, and the Beguiler as casters. So, you got the Psionics, you got the Arcane, you got the Divine. Should be good on that front. And also, I will probably talk about this another time, because I'm running out of time here, but I'm certainly going ahead with the Magic Psionics Transparency. You definitely want to use that. You do not want them to be different. That is a mistake unless your campaign literally only has 1. If you are only using psionics and no magic, or you are only using magic and no psionics, then fine, it doesn't matter. They could be different things. You can talk about them as flavor, theoretically, within the campaign. Like, there used to be these people that used their mind, but now they're all gone. Fine, you could do that. But really, if you're going to have both, there's a whole lot to say there. I'm just going to move on and really try hard to remember the sixth character, because I forgot who the sixth character is. Oh yeah, the druid, right, how can I forget? So, I mean, the druid can do anything. Like, druids are just the best. Okay, fine. I have at least one tier 1. That's fine. I am not worried about that player trying to overshadow anyone. At worst, I have a single power gamer. I'm not going to say who it is in case my players are listening. And, I mean, as far as power gamers go, like, hardly a power gamer. Like, it's not even an issue. So I have a really good group of players, like I said. I really enjoy my group. They play the game to play the game. It's great. I love it. And I'm really looking forward to it because I feel like I've got a balanced party. They built their characters while talking to each other, and that's what you want to do. You want to have everybody working together so that they'll have a role, they'll be able to engage effectively, they'll feel like they're part of the story, like they're actually participating, they're being effective, they can contribute. That's what you want. That's why some people like to break down the classes into the tier system so that they can say, okay, we're only going to use these tiers. I don't like to think about it as, okay, we can only use these tiers. I feel like that's restricting options. I think that you could just, work together and then you don't have to worry about that kind of problem. But there are groups where it's not that easy. And I've been there, I've dealt with that, so I understand. Once the group understands how optimization works, how the tier system works, how balance works within the game, then I think that everything can work pretty smoothly, and then a lot of fun can be had. So I definitely talked about a number of things that I want to talk about next time. I hope I remember them all. Alright, until then,